People will be judged by what they appear to be, so become a masterpiece of role-playing. This quote by Robert Greene reveals one of the most uncomfortable truths about the world we live in. No matter how honest, competent, or genuine you are, if people don't see it, it simply doesn't matter. And what's worse, this logic is used against you. Manipulators know how to create perfect illusions. They hide their intentions, control how they are perceived, and use appearances to turn the game in their favor. While you try to be authentic, they dominate the field by creating a version of themselves that wins trust, admiration, and even fear. Have you ever seen someone who seemed trustworthy, friendly, and even brilliant get what they wanted, only to then reveal a completely different side? That's the power of appearances. They control what we see and shape the decisions we make. Have you ever felt that the people around you are playing an invisible game? A game you didn't even know you were playing? Yes, it happens every day. And what's worse, you're losing. And that's exactly what the 48 Laws of Power is about. It's no ordinary book. It doesn't try to teach you how to be a better person or how to create genuine relationships. On the contrary, it lays bare how the world really works behind the scenes of power. It is described as a brutal, cold, and for many, even cruel manual. A guide that teaches you how to manipulate, deceive, and win at any cost. But what it doesn't say directly is the price these strategies charge. Because in order to follow these laws, you have to abandon values, sacrifice relationships, and in many cases, even give up who you really are. And that's why understanding these laws is so important. Because they are not just strategies for those who want to dominate, they are also a mirror for those who want to survive. The control of appearances, the manipulation of emotions, the use of other people's weaknesses, all of this is being used against you, even if you don't see it. And what makes these strategies so effective? It's precisely the fact that the person being manipulated often doesn't even realize it. It all starts with one of the manipulator's most powerful weapons, controlling appearances. In the game of power, the truth matters less than appearances. Robert Greene states in Law 3, "Conceal your intentions." For those who want to manipulate, this is one of the most effective strategies. When people don't know what you really want, they are disarmed. And while they're trying to guess your next steps, you're already several moves ahead. This logic is everywhere. In the workplace, it's the colleague who seems to support you, but is hiding their intention to take your place. In personal relationships, it's that friend who always acts charismatic, but only shows up when they need something. They project confidence, but hide their true intentions, and you often realize it too late. Thomas Edison is a classic example of how this law can be used. He manipulated Nikola Tesla, promising rewards and partnerships while secretly profiting from his inventions. Tesla believed the facade created by Edison, but in the end he was discarded as soon as his usefulness ran out. This story is not just an episode from the past, it is a wake-up call. Edison used another powerful strategy that Greene describes in Law 6, get attention at any price. To survive in the power game, being ignored is like disappearing. That's why manipulators create controversies, take flashy positions, and do everything they can to stand out. This hasn't changed, especially in the 21st century. Think of today's world. Social media, CEOs of billion-dollar companies, and political leaders. It's not uncommon to see public figures creating calculated spectacles to keep the spotlight on them. They don't need to be genuine. They need to be seen. How many times have you seen someone gain influence just by being controversial or dramatic? While everyone looks at them, no one wonders what is really going on behind the scenes. This is where Law 37 comes in. Create compelling spectacles. Greene says that in order to dominate perceptions, you have to use symbols, grand gestures, and striking images. Everything that shines attracts the eye, and while people are dazzled, you act without anyone noticing. This logic is also dangerous in the modern world. Think of social media. Influencers create perfect lives in feeds that are more curation than reality. Companies launch campaigns full of promises but hide dubious practices. Even politicians use symbolic gestures, from emotional speeches to populist actions, to create an aura of strength and control, while real decisions take place out of the public eye. And what makes these strategies so effective is our predisposition to believe what we see. The human brain is programmed to process appearances first, and only then question them. This vulnerability is exploited by manipulators who know exactly how to construct illusions that seem unquestionable. But here's something Greene doesn't address: the price of living in this constant theater. When you rely on appearances to control what people think, you become a prisoner of your own performance. In a world where everything is a spectacle, authenticity is lost, and with it, true relationships, real values, and even peace of mind. Even so, we live in a world that values what appears to be more than what actually is. And that's why understanding these laws is so important, because they are not just strategies for those who want to dominate. They are a reflection of the world we live in. So how can you protect yourself? First, learn to question what you see. Not everything that's flashy is real, and not everything that glitters is gold. Secondly, observe patterns. Anyone who creates constant drama or seems too perfect may be hiding something. And finally, practice letting go of the superficial. True value lies in what you build with authenticity, not in what you project onto others. As you try to navigate this world of appearances, the greatest danger may not be in what you see, but in the people you trust. After all, not all betrayal comes from enemies. Often, it's much closer than you think, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about: the danger of blind trust, and why even your closest friends can be a threat. Is this content making you reflect and sparking new ways of thinking? If so, click the super thanks button just below the video. It's a way to say thank you and help me bring more content like this to those who need to reflect on life. Betrayal never comes from an enemy. It always comes from those closest to you. This is one of the most uncomfortable truths in the game of power. Robert Greene in Law 2 warns, "Don't trust your friends too much. Learn to use your enemies." It may sound cynical, even cruel, but think about how many times someone you trusted has let you down. A close friend who turned their back on you when you needed them most. A work colleague who seemed to be on your side, but took the first opportunity to take credit for your efforts. Or that family member who, out of envy or greed, passed you over to achieve their own goals. The reason for this is simple. Friends often feel too comfortable. They believe that the relationship they have with you is unshakable, and so they let themselves be carried away by emotions such as envy, insecurity, or even boredom. An envious friend seeing your success can be more dangerous than a declared enemy. A classic example of this dynamic can be found in the story of Julius Caesar and Brutus. Caesar blindly trusted Brutus, believing that his loyalty was unshakable. But Brutus, influenced by others and motivated by his own ambitions, became part of the conspiracy that led to Caesar's death. The phrase, "even you, Brutus," is not just a lament, it is a portrait of how betrayal from someone close has the most devastating impact. Greene reinforces that while friends become complacent, enemies, on the other hand, have something to prove. They strive to earn your trust and can often be more loyal than friends. It's a difficult idea to accept, but it makes sense in a world where relationships are guided not just by feelings, but by interests. Now think about the world we live in. Relationships are more volatile than ever. At work, fierce competition means that professional friendships quickly turn into rivalries. On social media, where everyone projects an idealized version of themselves, it's hard to know who's really on your side. Even in personal relationships, superficiality often takes the place of genuine trust. And this is where Law 33 comes in. Discover each other's weaknesses. Manipulators understand that no one is invulnerable. They watch, they wait, and when they identify your insecurities or hidden desires, they use this against you. Perhaps it's the fear of rejection, the need to be accepted, or the desire for recognition. We all have something that makes us vulnerable, and manipulators know exactly where to put the squeeze. But how can we protect ourselves? The first step is to accept that not everyone around you is really rooting for you. This doesn't mean living in paranoia, but with attention. Pay attention to those who are always around but never seem happy about your success. Notice attitudes that don't match words. And, most importantly, protect what is most valuable to you, your weaknesses. Don't reveal too much, especially to someone who hasn't yet proven to be trustworthy. The second step is to learn to distinguish between genuine intentions and false gestures of loyalty. A true ally is not afraid to question you or point out when something is wrong. A manipulator, on the other hand, is often overly flattering or convenient, but disappears when they no longer need you. Betrayals are inevitable because they are part of human nature, but they hurt most when they come from where we least expect them. And while we learn to protect ourselves, we need to remember that trust must not be discarded, but must be earned. Loyalty cannot be demanded, it must be built. And if friends can become threats, what about those who plan every step carefully? It's shocking how the book shows how manipulators create invisible strategies to dominate any situation. You may think that luck or chance determine the outcomes of your life, but the truth is, while you believe that, someone is calculating your every move. Robert Greene, in Law 29, states, "Plan to the end." For him, real power doesn't lie in impulsive reactions or improvised moves. It lies in the ability to foresee obstacles, manipulate events, and calculate how to turn every situation to one's advantage. And that's exactly what makes manipulators so dangerous. They never leave anything to chance. Everything is precisely thought out. The words, the gestures, the moments of silence. They know the board better than anyone, and while you act in the heat of the moment, they have already planned the next move and how you will react. This strategy has deep roots in history. Napoleon Bonaparte, for example, is one of the greatest strategists of all time. He not only anticipated his enemies' movements, but created scenarios that forced them to act exactly as he wanted. At the Battle of Austerlitz, Napoleon pretended to be at a disadvantage, retreating his troops strategically. His opponents, confident of victory, advanced without realizing that they were being lured into an ambush. The result was a landslide victory for Napoleon, who proved that meticulous planning overcomes even numbers at a disadvantage. In the modern world, strategies are more subtle, but just as calculated. Think of the corporate environment. A manipulative boss can apply Green's Law 11, learn to keep people dependent on you. He may delegate tasks incompletely, ensuring that you need him for every step. He may praise you just enough to keep you motivated, but never to the point of making you feel independent. This kind of strategy creates a relationship of dependence that gives him total control and you the illusion of progress. And this isn't limited to work. On social networks, we see algorithms designed to create cycles of dependency. These platforms have evolved to become tools that know you better than you know yourself. They analyze your behavior patterns, anticipate your desires, and shape your feed in such a way as to keep you hooked, consuming, and interacting. This is strategic planning in its most modern form. It's not about dominating a battlefield. It's about dominating your attention. And what makes these strategies so effective is that they exploit our human weaknesses. Studies in psychology, such as those carried out by renowned psychologist Daniel Kahneman, show that human beings are naturally reactive. Instead of acting with planning, we are prone to reacting to what is in front of us, especially when we are under pressure or distracted. This is exactly what manipulators use to their advantage. A famous experiment known as the Mind Hook study revealed that when people are exposed to carefully constructed scenarios, they tend to follow the planned path without question. The participants in the study were led to make decisions that seemed spontaneous, but had in fact already been predicted by the researchers. The same thing happens in the power game. While you think you're acting on your own, you're already following someone else's script. And here's the philosophical question. Does someone who lives by planning every move really live? Robert Greene suggests that power depends on absolute control, but at what cost? A manipulator becomes hostage to his own strategy. He needs to anticipate every scenario, always have the upper hand, never relax. It's an exhausting and often lonely existence. On the other hand, anyone who doesn't understand these strategies runs the risk of becoming a piece on someone else's board. If you don't recognize the signs of a carefully laid plan, you can spend your whole life reacting, believing that you have choices when in fact, you're just following the path that someone else has laid out for you. So how can we protect ourselves? The first step is to recognize that nothing happens by chance. If someone is always in the right place, with the perfect solution or a calculated gesture, question it. Observe patterns of behavior. Manipulators leave traces, excessive praise, subtle control, vague promises. The second step is to create your own plan. Planning is not only a tool for those who manipulate, but also for those who want to protect themselves. Have clear goals and know where you want to go, so that no one can dictate the pace of your life. As Greene says, the outcome is everything. Knowing where you want to go is what separates those who lead from those who follow. As you reflect on this, remember that the greatest risk is not only in those who manipulate with visible strategies. It also lies with those who hide the consequences of their actions behind a facade of good intentions. And that's what we're going to talk about next. How power takes its toll, and how the costs of playing this game are often greater than you think. In the game of power, the objective is clear: to win. But what no one talks about is the price this exacts. Robert Greene, in Law 36 of the 48 Laws of Power states, "Despise what you cannot have." The idea is straightforward. Striving for what is out of reach only consumes energy. creates unnecessary conflict, and can destroy everything you've already achieved. But, ironically, most people do exactly the opposite. The desire for more power, more recognition, more control, is what leads many to ignore limits and cross barriers that shouldn't be crossed. This fuels ambition, but at the same time, turns the player into a prisoner of the game itself. A clear example of this is Shakespeare's tragedy Macbeth. At the beginning of the play, Macbeth is a respected general, someone with merit and honor, but the prophecy that he would become king plants in him an uncontrollable ambition. To reach the throne, he betrays, lies, and even kills. When he finally obtains the power he desired, he discovers that his conquest has brought loneliness, paranoia, and the loss of everything he valued. In the end, he is consumed by his own ambition and destroyed by it. This story is not just a piece of literature. It reflects something we've all seen before. People who lose themselves in pursuit of achievements that, deep down, never satisfy them. This is because power doesn't come alone. It carries with it responsibilities, tensions, and above all, the need to be constantly fed. Green explores this in Law 1. Don't dim the master's glow. At the top, power requires constant vigilance. You need to please allies, protect yourself from adversaries, and, above all, ensure that no one around you feels threatened. But this is exhausting. The constant quest for control wears you down. And for many, this price only becomes apparent when it's too late. Think of the stories of people who reached the top but didn't find peace. Howard Hughes, for example, was one of the most brilliant businessmen of the 20th century. He made an unimaginable fortune, but at the height of his power, he became reclusive, consumed by paranoia and the inability to trust anyone. His insatiable quest for control and perfection left him isolated, a prisoner of himself. And this cycle is not exclusive to great figures. It manifests itself in everyday life, in personal or professional relationships. How many times have you seen someone sacrifice friendships, health, or principles for the sake of something that, in the end, didn't bring them the happiness they had hoped for? This is where an important reflection comes in. Ambition is a powerful tool, but when misdirected, it can be destructive. The true strategist is not the one who seeks everything, but the one who knows how to choose his battles. Power that is not used with purpose becomes empty, an illusion that consumes more than it delivers. That's why one of the greatest lessons Green gives us is to know how to stop. As he writes, the endpoint is everything. Understanding where you want to go, and above all, knowing when you've achieved enough, is what separates the strategists from those who just react to the impulse to want more. But at the same time, you have to remember that the world we live in often rewards unbridled ambition. For those who want to survive, it is essential to observe these patterns, identify the signs of excess, and above all, avoid being swallowed up by them. After all, what really matters is not the achievement itself, but what you lose or preserve along the way. And as we reflect on this, one question remains. Is there a path where you don't have to play this game? A place where the real power lies in not being bound by the rules the world imposes. Sometimes the most powerful act is not winning, but choosing not to play. And that's the freedom I want to talk about. Choose not to play. Sounds simple, doesn't it? Just deciding that you're not going to take part in the manipulations, the strategies, the power games. But the truth is that the world doesn't work like that. Even if you choose not to play, others continue to play, and you will often be put on the board, whether you like it or not. Robert Greene, in Law 48, says, avoid having a set form. He proposes that the best way to survive in the game is not to be predictable, adapting to situations and escaping traps. But this idea also raises an essential point. How do you balance this flexibility with maintaining values and principles? To what extent does adaptation become submission to the game? And when does it compromise who you really are? This is the dilemma between what is right and what is necessary. In the game of power, it's not always possible to do what's morally right without suffering consequences. There are times when you need to navigate gray waters to protect yourself or those who matter. The challenge is to know how to do this without losing the essence of what you believe in. Imagine a common situation in the workplace. You have a brilliant idea that could transform the direction of a project, but you know that your boss is the type to take credit for everything. If you share the idea directly, it will be stolen. If you keep it to yourself, the project could fail. What should you do? In these moments, understanding the game is essential. Not so that you become like the people who abuse it, but so that you know how to protect what is important without being exploited. You could, for example, involve other people in the discussion, creating a network of witnesses who recognize your contribution. In this way, you prevent the idea from being stolen without getting into a direct conflict. Philosophy also helps us to reflect on this dilemma. The philosopher Nicholas Machiavelli, in The Prince, argues that an effective leader cannot always act according to conventional morality. He must do whatever is necessary to maintain power and protect his state. Although many see this as a defense of amorality, it is in fact a pragmatic analysis of the world. Machiavelli is not suggesting that you should be cruel for pleasure, but that survival in some cases requires difficult choices. On the other hand, there are those who believe that it is possible to resist the game without losing. The story of Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor and author of In Search of Meaning, is a powerful example of this. Even in the Nazi concentration camps, where humanity seemed to have been completely annihilated, Frankl found a way to maintain his values. He chose not to let the environment destroy his essence, finding meaning even in suffering. The point is not to compare the difficulties of everyday life to Frankl's extreme experiences, but to learn from his perspective. Even in the most adverse scenarios, there is room for conscious choices that preserve who you are. And this is where the most important question arises. How do you navigate between these extremes? How do you understand the rules of the game without being consumed by them? The answer lies in balancing strategy and morality, recognizing that there are times when protection requires careful play, but that you should never lose sight of what really matters. To do this, it is vital to cultivate 3 skills. Having self-awareness and knowing who you are and what you value is the first step to resisting external pressures. When you are clear about your principles, it is easier to make decisions in line with them. Do a good contextual reading. Not every situation calls for a direct or morally pure approach. Knowing how to assess the scenario and the intentions of the people around you helps you avoid pitfalls and make more effective decisions. And finally, have resilience. Even with the best planning, there are times when you will face losses or challenges. At such times, it is essential to have the ability to pick yourself up without giving up what is essential to you. Choosing not to play is often the wisest decision, but that doesn't mean turning a blind eye to the game. It means understanding it, anticipating the moves of those who try to manipulate you, and using this knowledge to protect yourself and what you value. The world will continue to reward those who play aggressively and immorally, but you don't have to be like that to survive or thrive. True power lies not in beating others, but in not being controlled by them. While the game of power goes on, your greatest advantage is to know the rules so well that you don't have to play it. Because in the end, freedom is not in manipulating or winning, but in living authentically and consciously, choosing what really matters and leaving the rest to others. And remember, knowledge is the path to true freedom. Count on me and follow the White Rabbit.